evening and welcome to The Breakdown, brought to you by the Lincoln Project. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and he's brought along one of his friends tonight.
It's Dobby.
Look at him, how cute. Usually you see kitties on the show from us. Tonight we've got a dog.
Before this started. So Dobby's joining us briefly tonight.
Well, he's welcome to join us any time. Welcome. He just can't bark though. It'll kill us through our IFPs.
All right, why don't you get down there?
Oh my goodness. Well, I hope we see him again soon. There may be a tiki sighting tonight too. He's wandering around here. So yes, it could be the pet night tonight on The Breakdown. Tonight we are really going to talk about something important, something we've been hammering home for a long time, which is January 6th. We have been very serious about never forgetting that day. It is a day of infamy in this country, and tomorrow marks the 100 days since the insurrection. So tonight we have a great guest with us. He is a disinformation expert. He has helped uncover some of the rioters, the insurrectionists. He's helped with his technology to identify them. And he's a senior researcher at the Citizen Lab up there at the University of Toronto. John Scott-Railton is joining us in a little bit to talk all about his work, what he's done, why this matters. And he also helped break a story that was in the Daily Beast this week about a former Navy SEAL and his son and their role in the insurrection on the 6th. It's a lot. It's amazing stuff. So stay tuned for him. And as always, we want to hear from you. So send us your tweets at #AskTheBreakdown, #AskTheBreakdown, or you can always go old school. You know, we love the voicemails. Send us a voicemail. We listen to them. They're pretty awesome, most of them. But there's the number. Call us, leave us a voicemail, and maybe we'll play one during the show. I also wanted to let our audience know that this is the last show of season 1 of The Breakdown. We are taking a mid-season hiatus for a couple of weeks, but don't worry, you'll still be able to hear from us. We have some special programming, little tidbits and things that'll be going on during the weeks that we are in hiatus, so you'll still have access to us, but you have to follow us at LPTV on Twitter, where we will share some more details on what we're doing and how you can still watch us and listen to us and what we're doing during our little hiatus. And then we'll be back in a few weeks.
Season 2 will be much darker and have much more nudity. That's all I can say. I'm not going to preview anything else.
There may be chest hair, I heard from Rick Wilson. And we don't know tonight whether Rick Wilson has on pants or not. The mystery continues.
Could be, could not. I mean, I live in Florida.
Yeah, it gets a little warm down there, who knows? I don't know.
If you take my meaning.
Oh, God, Rick. Gee whiz.
Yes, I'm 12.
Moving on from that. Back to the show. So, yes, January 6th, hard turn, as we call it in the industry. This is a hard turn. I think we need to remind our audience a little bit about what happened, because Rick, it feels to me like even the president, the Democrats, they're kind of trying to move past it, right? That happened. That thing was very ugly. We don't like it, but we've got other things to worry about. And that's true. We do. There's a lot that has to be fixed in this country. COVID, the vaccines, foreign affairs. There's a lot happening because there was a mess left in the wake of Donald Trump. But part of what was left in the wake of Donald Trump was the first time in the history of the United States that there was not a peaceful transition of power. And that is because of what happened on January 6th and what led up to it and Donald Trump's role. Let's remind our viewers what happened that day and how we got there.
The people who did nothing to stop the steal. This gathering should send a message to them. This isn't their Republican Party anymore. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
They are trying to silence your voice. Make no mistake about it, they do not want you to be heard.
We are going to take our country back.
And we're going to take back this country. We're going to take back America.
They can say that there's no voter fraud, but see, we know that there is.
Is there any person here that actually thinks that Joe Biden won this election?
Sleepy Joe Biden did not win this election.
Liberty-loving patriots that will not let them steal this election.
Let's have trial by combat.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
You can be a hero or you can be a zero.
Rick, it's so infuriating.
When it comes to being a zero, Donald Trump Jr. should know. But you watch those clips, and you have to keep in mind, this wasn't just some Trump rally where they were bullshitting. This wasn't just some rah-rah event. This was an event where a large percentage of the people that were there took the action they were ordered to take by the president. Go to the Capitol. I'll be walking with you. That's what he said. Take it back. Take it. And I watched that clip as that piece was coming together. I watched a lot of it over and over again. And it just reminds me how important this mission is, because we came this damn close, minutes, not hours, right, from the murder of American elected representatives and senators, and the overthrow of our system of government, and the overthrow of a free and fair election. It is an astounding day, and we still should not forget it at all.
I think people need to be reminded of that. It was minutes, not hours, what you just said, Rick, because of the heroic action by Officer Goodman, that Capitol Police officer that not only probably saved the life of Senator Mitt Romney, but also saved the Secret Service from probably opening fire on American citizens to protect the vice president that day. I mean, just saying that right now gives me chills, actually. I just don't know.
Does anyone think that mob would not have murdered Mitt Romney if they found him? Does anyone think that mob would not have killed him dead if they found Mitt Romney or Nancy Pelosi or anybody else that they didn't think was 100% on board for Donald Trump?
That's right. I mean, they killed a Capitol Police officer and injured 140 more. We saw the videos. We saw the rabid violence and what they were doing, and picking up metal poles. I mean, and bear spray, and imagine if they were armed. It's only because of DC, gun laws that they knew that, well, we can't have our weapons because then that's a whole different federal charge. But they use other things. This is, speaking of that whole thing and talking about the Capitol Police officers and what happened that day. Earlier this week, right before we went on air, there was a story that dropped, breaking news about the Inspector General, Michael Bolton, who had a report getting ready to testify, and he testified today, actually, on Capitol Hill, in front of Capitol Hill virtually, about some of the failures of the Capitol Police that day. And I've got to tell you, that is a really scathing report, and it's a terrible indictment of the Capitol Police Force.
It really is.
I encourage folks to read. Yeah, I encourage folks to read the Washington Post story that's out today. And the Washington Post has done really, really good work on breaking down what happened that day. But the story today, where they outline his testimony in a little more detail that was in his report, I mean, they were warned. We knew this. But then there was a failure at the leadership level to actually make sure that they had the right roster of people. They didn't have the proper equipment. Equipment failed on them. Some of the leadership that headed some of the units that were responsible for this, like the civil disturbance unit, they weren't even properly trained. They told some of their guys to not use non-lethal force like stun grenades to push back the crowd. The intelligence that came from the FBI and other places that these folks were going to probably be violent and were targeting Congress, that this wasn't just going to be some protest that went awry, that this was planned and targeted, that failed. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. There were so many levels of failure here, and it cost lives, including one of their own that day, another to suicide, and other officers that have been maimed and injured as a result. And something has to be done. I've always said that I think there should be a commission to get further information about what happened. Not something like that never happens again. But it also seems to be that the Capitol Police needs a complete overhaul from their leadership from the top down.
They really do.
And they've got to fix that. They've got to fix that.
And it shows us how fragile the system can be, where those folks, the worst thing those guys usually have to deal with is a lost tourist. And they, in this case, were in a life or death situation. And, I think the things that have come out in this initial reporting and the IG report are unbelievably shocking and dangerous, and require a really stern and hard look at the security of one of the branches of our fundamental branches of our government. But it does say to me that they also exercised enormous restraint that day. The death of one protester who was attempting to break through the glass and get to a group of members of Congress. That woman, I won't say her name, she's become a sort of folk hero on the far right as a sort of martyr. But these people are very fortunate that they weren't facing a much more severe response than they did.
That's right.
And
that officer was cleared, by the way, this week. Also, he was cleared in that shooting. That it was a justified shoot.
That's correct. Yes, but they have a lot of really hard thinking to do about their role as protecting an entire branch of our government. And this isn't something trivial. This is a very serious moment.
And that's something that the Inspector General, Michael Bolton, which is just funny to say, not that like Michael Bolton, a different one. He didn't have the hair either. But no, the Inspector General during his testimony today was reading from his report where he said that there needs to be a cultural change within the department and that they should no longer operate like a traditional police department because of the nature of their roles, that they need to change and look at themselves as a protective agency, like the Secret Service, because they do provide a different role in protecting the perimeter of the Capitol. They also protect Nancy Pelosi and leaders inside the leaders of the Congress. Capitol Police does do that. So, but I want to say thank you to many of the hardworking Capitol Police officers who, they do have a tough job every day of making sure that members of Congress are safe, but they definitely need to have some improvement. I want to read a little bit from the report just to give folks an idea of some of the problems that were discovered. 3 days before the siege, a Capitol Police intelligence assessment warned of violence from the supporters of the president. And the threat assessment said, unlike previous protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporters are not necessarily the counter-protesters, like Black Lives Matter, as they were previously, but rather Congress itself is the target on January 6th. Stop the Steal's propensity to attract white supremacists, militia members, and others who actively promote violence may lead to a significantly dangerous situation for law enforcement and the general public alike. And yet, on January 5th, the agency wrote in a plan for the protests that there were, quote, no specific known threats related to the joint session of Congress. That is, no wonder the captain of the police department, or the chief of the Capitol Police resigned. I mean, there were a lot of problems and a lot of breakdowns, but that seems pretty stark. Also, to date, there are 419 people who have been charged, and at least 43 of them are military veterans, which presents a whole different set of problems. That number is more than a third of the veterans who had reported ties to domestic terrorist organizations that day. That's 4 times more the rate of non-military arrestees so far in the case. This is a problem that we have going on with extremism, not only in law enforcement, but in our military, unfortunately. And then you have this tweet by Josh Hawley. I think it was yesterday. I don't know if it was today or yesterday. This freaking guy standing there with the Missouri National Guard, thanking them for supporting the Capitol Police and guarding the Capitol. This fucker is part of the reason why they're there in the first place.
Correct. I mean, if you want to find a reason why those guys have to be there, it's because that seditionist creep was whipping up the big lie for weeks and weeks on end before January 6th, was on the floor of the Senate that day, attempting to disenfranchise millions of African-American voters. Josh Hawley is a proximate actor in this entire affair. But it does show you, Tara, and it's something we should be very mindful of. The current iteration of the Trump Republican Party cannot be shamed. You cannot make them feel bad. You cannot make them feel guilty. You cannot point a moral spotlight on them and say, hey, don't do this anymore. It's a dick move. You have to punish them in other ways. You have to punish them politically. You have to mock them. You have to humiliate them. You have to drive them into the earth. You have to have the electoral consequences visit them. You have to bring pressure on their supporters, their donors, their friends, their families. You have to push and push and push, because that picture with Josh Hawley tells you his attitude towards America and towards the people who are concerned about what happened on the 6th, where we almost lost this country, is a big fuck you. So, yeah, it is really quite remarkable. Yeah, the raised fist.
Well, let's remind our audience a little bit about who Josh Hawley is and his role.
Let's do that. Yes.
Josh Hawley will be one of the greatest champions.
Are you trying to say that as of January 20th, that President Trump will be president?
Well, that depends on what happens on Wednesday.
And the Kansas City Star writes plainly that he has, quote, blood on his hands.
Let's have trial by combat.
Jack Danforth called Hawley's objector movement a highly destructive attack on our constitutional government. It's the opposite of conservative. It's radical.
Infuriating. Let's bring in tonight's guest and get even more infuriated because when we hear more about what happened that day, it's a little difficult to keep it together because it's so alarming on many levels. John Scott-Railton is a senior researcher at the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto's Munk School. His work focuses on technological threats to civil society, including targeted malware operations, cyber militias, and online disinformation. His many investigations include those focused on the use of spyware to target civil society, ISIS-led malware operations, the tainted leaks disinformation campaign strongly linked to Russia, and the manipulation of news aggregators such as Google News. Most recently, as I mentioned earlier, he's been using photo enhancement, open source search techniques, and tips from the public to help identify members of the January 6th mob. And he was integral in a breaking news story from the Daily Beast about a former Navy SEAL and his son and their role in the January 6th insurrection. And he is our guest tonight. John, thank you for joining us.
Folks, good to see you. How are you this evening?
Hey, thanks for being with us, John.
We're good. Let me start really quick to ask you your reaction to that Inspector General's report, given all of the work that you've done on this and what you've seen happen with the Capitol Police and what you saw that day. What's your reaction to Michael Bolton's report?
Well, I think what we're looking at is a situation that could have been predicted in certain scenarios, but that ultimately was more than anybody expected. What continues to shock me, I spend every day looking at footage from what happened at the Capitol, is the fact that time and time again, we see reports of police brutality, but not there. We see reports of excessive use of force, but not there. What amazes me is both how much the police were overwhelmed and ill-prepared, but also the extent to which people behaving in ways that were violent and dangerous saw no consequences that day. And as a result, months later, we're still trying to figure out who they were.
Scott, I think that's one of the most important questions we have here is yes, the work that folks like you have done is unbelievably valuable in helping law enforcement start to point out the people that were the foot soldiers in this moment, that were the shock troops in this moment. We're still, as a country, I think, struggling with how we're going to hold the people who were cheerleading it and provoking it and driving it and organizing it to account. I mean, we really haven't seen as much progress, I think, on bringing the Stop the Steal people who, I'm no attorney, but it sure smells like a criminal conspiracy to me. those people have been far behind the curve in terms of being targeted by law enforcement and by the FBI, et cetera, and focused on where they are getting the guys who are the idiots in cosplay, dress up gear and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, I mean, honestly, it's LARPers all the way down. The story you mentioned when you introduced me, there was a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL who was there, brought his son. But even then, clearly not much of a SEAL. He doesn't seem to have deployed very much. So, but yet he was making a living doing motivational speaking, mostly talking about his experience at SEAL training. He was LARPing for the benefit of the Oath Keepers who were there, who themselves often had checkered and questionable military histories, but who were busy LARPing as Special Forces soldiers, LARPing for the people who were the paintballers who were there wearing their Wish.com soldier gear and the stuff that they bought was Chinese copies. It's just what fascinates me about this, as much as anything else, and I got to see it. So in the last couple of days, we did this collaboration with the Daily Beast and a group called Deep State Dogs to reveal this guy, Shannon Rush, brought his son. And the thing is, it wasn't even the only father-son pair that came. I mean, once upon a time, you got to think these people would be taking their sons out to learn how to whittle in the woods. But today it's like light insurrection on a weekday. And you have to ask, what on earth is the ideological poison that has this multi-generational penetrating power that has made its way through families, that makes this thing something acceptable? The hate and the ideology there is deep. And for me, January 6th is a diagnostic. It's a terrifying dipstick stuck into the biggest and maddest conspiracy I think the US has ever seen in terms of conspiracy theories and what they can do to move people there. And we just see all kinds of really concerning elements. Most of them went home. And I think a lot of them were like, this is kind of an amazing experience. They're waiting kind of for what the next thing is going to be.
Yeah, I think that to me is one of the things here that, yes, a few of the more prominent idiots have been caught, but my fear has always been that it won't be these B and C and D tier guys someday. That someday there will be, guys who went through ODA training for the Green Berets, or guys who specialized in unconventional warfare, that will get together and will train people and will take action that would be profoundly dangerous and disruptive. And I think I think you're right. A lot of people looked at this as something that was fun. They were having fun.
They bragged about it, including the guy that the Shannon Rush guy. I encourage folks to read the Daily Beast story. It's fascinating. But he went on. I mean, he tried to deny that he was there, that his son, or that he went inside, and that his son didn't go inside. But then there's video that you guys uncovered of his son inside, possibly with a police baton. It looks like he picked up. He was clearly very thrilled and very proud of himself. And then he posted on social media bragging about being there.
I think thank you to all those who decided to attend and stream their presence, because it's made the work of volunteer sleuths and everybody else a lot easier. So we thank you. But you know what it also does is it shows just how integral technology was to what happened. These were people who were, there's the Dixie Chicks song about dad listening to propaganda on the radio. Well, today, dad isn't listening to propaganda on the radio, right? He is all over Facebook, and he is just, it's just slamming it right into his vein. And, is ready to show his friends the great stuff that he did. I mean, one thing that really gets me, and I just keep thinking about this, is that they were doing an insurrection. They were also performing an insurrection, because they had been told and shown what the performance of the language of political violence looks like by politicians. Mm-hmm. For years, the rhetorical temperature was going up so high it would have boiled all these fish. And at the same time, everyone was always saying, well, this is rhetoric, right? This is rhetoric. It's different, right? Even though the day before, Ali Alexander is on a stage saying victory or death, and Rudy Giuliani is making a fool of himself yet again, talking about trial by combat, we're supposed to believe that that is really just language. Well, what it is it is a rhetorical round put into a gun and aimed at the Capitol. I mean, what blows my mind is that
did we lose John?
I think we might have lost John
really quickly. We'll get him back.
No, I think his point, though, Tara, is absolutely well taken. You back? We got you?
I think he's back. He's back.
Yep.
All right,
John,
you're back.
you froze for about 15 seconds. So we missed the last 15 seconds of what you said.
Well, it was probably the COVID microchip vaccine and the fluoridation water that did it. Here's the thing. What blows my mind is that was a very performative event. People were there, but they were also performing being there. And the reason they were doing it is because they had been shown all these different conspiracy theories that somehow made them feel that all of America was with them. And, diversity is a great thing. What there was heterogeneity in that crowd. There were people who were going there because they probably thought that Mike Pence was an alien. There were people who were going there because QAnon told them that something big was going to happen. There were people going there because they were oath keepers and they wanted to play at being soldiers. All of these different lines brought people to the Capitol that day. It's a remarkable thing. I've never seen that much consilience. And I think what's kind of amazing, if you look at them now, and we are, is that you see them casting around like, what's the next thing that will keep us all together? And right now, I'll tell you what it is. It's vaccination and it's COVID. And the numbers are bananas. If you look at a recent poll done by, I think it was Pew, Charitable Trust, and NPR, something about like 50% of American men who identify as conservatives say they don't plan on getting vaccinated. That's bananas. I mean, it's like death-colored stuff,
Yes.
And we don't need tier 1 SEAL operators training people or going in there and raiding the Capitol in order to kill Americans. We need disinformation about the COVID vaccine. That'll kill people too.
It has. And it's killed over 550,000 Americans. And you have 40% of Marines in a poll saying that they won't take the vaccine either. This is the through line through this with the conspiracy theories. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who is a retired Marine who was on one of the, I think it's the FAST team where they go and respond Marines. So he's one step below special forces, really smart guy, posting borderline QAnon stuff on his Facebook page, talking about, he had a meme that had a little girl that was in the arms of looks like her mother, that had a sign that said, you should be more scared of human trafficking than COVID. Coming from a really smart guy who's really well trained in weapons is now like QAnon curious. And we got into an argument actually over it. And I was like, come on, man, you're smarter than this. What are you doing? But I don't want a guy it scares me. What scares me more than both of those things is a guy like him who's that well trained falling down this rabbit hole.
And here's the thing, it's a potent rabbit hole. And what's so amazing about it, this isn't intelligent design, this is evolution, right? The reason the rabbit hole is so effective, here's my little view. Disinformation is just marketing. The product is a feeling, and the profit is behavior. And if you think that the internet is basically designed right now around platforms for marketers, identifying your audience, showing them things, figuring out exactly what works, and then making sure that it translates into a purchase behavior, that's exactly what disinformation is. And the current internet environment has democratized the ability for people to sell things online. It's also democratized the ability to carefully hone your message. Back in the day, David Duke in North Carolina had to make some guesses about how to get notoriety and get attention. Today, any of us with a Twitter account can look and see exactly how our tweets perform. We can look and see exactly how our messages perform, and we can hone it and identify our audiences. And we generate content that's more effective, and it pulls people in. I think in a big way, the internet has become a giant disinformation laboratory, and we're all lab rats, and we're kind of all doing it to each other at the same time.
Well, the social dilemma
right.
would back that up for sure. That the documentary, The Social Dilemma, would demonstrates that. And since I just came back from North Carolina, I feel I need to defend them. David Duke was Louisiana's problem, not North Carolina.
I'm so sorry.
But your point is well taken.
I don't know why. You know what it is? I've got North Carolina on the brain because of some of the Oath Keepers, but he was indeed Louisiana's problem until he became all of our problem.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that is.
But your point is well taken there. I mean, their ability to communicate the most real aspects of their beliefs 30 years ago was still largely constrained by like mimeographed or Xeroxed, newsletters and garbage human being one-to-one contact. Now we have this algorithmically hyper-optimized set of communication platforms that feed you more of what you want. And if you tell them even once what you want is horrible racist garbage like David Duke, you will get a lot more David Duke. I mean, that's the nut of this thing. And it is the algorithmic drivers and the AI are driving it. They're evolving and expanding much faster than our social functions and legal ability and regulatory ability can catch up.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the other way to sort of cut this, which is there's this really smart researcher who works on QAnon named Marc-André Argento. I'm probably butchering his name. I should say with a French accent. But the moral of the story is he came up with this term called pastel QAnon to describe how lifestyle influencers and yoga bloggers and vloggers were sort of a gateway drug into QAnon. And it turns out it's true. So for every special forces tier 1 operator with a bumper sticker about sex trafficking, you've got people doing yoga channels who are like, you should really think about natural healing options. And then 3 steps later, you're looking at QAnon stuff. I did some looking into this, and it's a real thing. There's a remarkable consilience. It's so interesting. There's a remarkable consilience of yoga and lifestyle influencers, natural health and natural supplements and healing, and conspiracy theories. And it's actually like, this is not new. Alex Jones figured this out a long time ago. He was just like the OG on this. Everyone else is using the internet and discovering that they can do this too. And it's phenomenally effective. So incredibly, you're seeing Stop the Steal people pivoting to anti-vax, like Ali Alexander. You're seeing yoga people pivot to QAnon. And you're seeing QAnon people pivoting to Stop the Steal. It's like, I don't know, it's an amazing thing to watch, and it's totally terrifying. It's like this bubbling eye of Sauron, sunspots of conspiracy popping out of it.
Speaking of Ali Alexander, that guy has been a shitbird from the way back, and a guy who really started to find his role as a liberty or death, war leader right before January 6th. What has happened to Ali Akbar? I mean, is he on the lam still, or are they looking for him? I mean, he clearly was part of the Stop the Steal conspiracy group.
Yeah, what an interesting character, right? For a decade, this guy was performing himself as an insider and living kind of on the margins of different, conservative campaigns. And just like, like the grift, like just like the pure gold seam of grift with that man. And then somehow he found his audience and his audience found him. And there's this musical to be written of the 2 different Stop the Steal camps, the Kramers, the old school Tea Party people with their My Pillow bus driving around America holding rallies, and then Ali Alexander standing on a stepladder wearing an orange sweater because maybe that's good luck, yelling about the need for victory or death. I mean, he's such an interesting character. He pops onto the scene and immediately begins registering new websites and spinning up websites as soon as the election happens. He performs himself as Roger Stone, the heir apparent. And he manages to drive traffic and solicit donations. Where the money goes, who knows? And turned himself into a face for this movement and kept doing rallies and sort of bringing this core of people together and brought them with him to the Capitol. What's fascinating is that he was easily dismissed because he's kooky. And so are a lot of the people who followed him. And that, I feel like, is the nub of this problem. We keep getting into this situation. The Tea Party, back in the day, looked real goofy, and everyone was laughing about their clothing until they fundamentally influenced politics and made a lot of money doing it. Similarly, Trump, people laughed, and here we are. Stop the Steal, people laughed. QAnon, people laughed, and here we are. I feel like I could just take off these examples, all these smart, right-thinking, progressive leftists and centrists, and like moderate Republicans looking at these groups and thinking, these people are nuts, and assuming that therefore, by force of their sheer wildness, they can't possibly have an effect. Well, it turns out that like entertainers, if you wear a sparkling thing, people pay attention to you.
Yeah. It's peacocking, the political version of peacocking, for sure.
That's true. I was going to ask, John, what do you think the common denominator here is for all of these people? Because you made the point earlier that there was such a heterogeneous group of wackos at this thing that would probably have nothing in common other than this. Why do you think that this whole Trump era and the Stop the Steal brought them all together? What's the through line here?
Oh man, I feel like there are many, but the simplest one for me is everyone saw opportunity and a bunch of them took it. They saw opportunity to make money off of fundraising. They saw opportunity to grow their user base by introducing QAnon content. They saw an opportunity to perform themselves as the soldiers they never were. They saw an opportunity to pretend that they were true patriots. This is all, it's like, when I look at this, what I see is a bunch of people who profited or who thought they were going to profit by this. And, I think at the end of the day, that really explains a lot of what we see. That explains a lot of the disinformation. A lot of disinformation in the last 4 years didn't really come from like intentional nation state efforts to disrupt democracy. It was like people in Moldova realizing that they could make money by writing absurd articles. And it turns out that like you add enough of those crazy things to the po' boia and you get quite a dish.
You get an insurrection on January 6th.
But there is people should not underestimate. There is in the disinformation space, there's a profit to be made. Alex Jones has made tens of millions of dollars screaming about, chemtrails and bisexual frogs and every other thing under the sun. Roger Stone doesn't take a dump without a profit motive. He was there for a reason with Stop the Steal, because these guys are strongly driven by the fact that they have discovered there's a white hot vein of people out there who believe in the most ludicrous conspiracies, and they can monetize that. Whether it's Alex Jones selling them iodine supplements or paywalled websites with special guest Lynn Wood and things like that. All this sort of builds this cruft around the craziness of a profit motive, and that makes it even more, and the Moldovans, of course, they're in the best business of all. They've got practically zero recurring costs. They've got these things algorithmically being written and translated into English, to pump out more and more crazy. Is this like, let's match up George Soros, Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, nanobots, Bill Gates, vaccines, and just ram the words together. And they've discovered people will click on that crap on Facebook.
Rick, I got to say, I feel like I saw signs that said most everything that you just said at the Capitol.
and then some, and T-shirts.
Right.
Speaking of that, we have a video of some of your work in concerning that Navy SEAL story and his son that I think we should show people, giving an example of what you do. So let's roll that.
All right, who's gonna donate the most money?
So we spotted this guy, and it turns out on the right, you've got Shannon Rush, former Navy SEAL, and on the left, a man who is strikingly like his son, Trevor McDonald. And here is Trevor, someone who appears like him, waving a police baton, like a police coup baton, as he enters the Capitol and ultimately lets out a whoop of excitement. Remarkable case there. This was an investigation that started a long time ago with some observations, both by people working with me and with this group called Deep State Dogs, a bunch of volunteers. You can find them on Twitter. And this guy really caught our attention because he was the only person in this marching row of Proud Boys in a particular picture that hadn't already been arrested. So it's like, who is this guy? And we went from there. And it turned out he had marched with them. He had pushed through barricades with them. He had shouted at cops. He was one of the first people up through the barricades at the west entrance. And this was Shannon Rush, noted former Navy SEAL, motivational speaker, and author of a book, something like The Warrior Mind, who brought his kid, which is, again, kind of remarkable. But I want to take a step back from this case for a second and say, one of the equally remarkable things is we're here basically 100 days later, and there are still scores of volunteers who are so concerned by what they saw that they are working second jobs, and in some cases full-time, just trying to help publicly understand and identify who was there and what they were doing. And I have to tell you, I don't see an end in sight. Like, I'm very relieved that the Rush case is out there, but I've got to pack more.
You know, can I ask you a quick question? Did you guys work the video backward, like from the people that were in the Capitol, in the chambers, in the halls of the Capitol, and ID people on that end,
That's
and
a
then
good question.
walk the video back to assess?
Let's talk tricky. I love it. This is no one's asked me this kind of methodological question. So basically, there are like four things that you want to do. First, obviously, you want to figure out who is in the Capitol, and so you want to take all those people, all those, all that clothing, all those, goofy flannel green things, the red hoodie, and other fashion catastrophes, and figure out where those people were and where they went afterwards, right? So it's like, here's the moment. But then there are a couple of other things that you want to do. The next thing that you want to do is you want to find people who are in groups that you can identify, like who's hanging out with the Oath Keepers that morning, who was, BSing with the Proud Boys early that morning and making jokes about women and drinking the night before and needing to find a place to pee. That's another group of interest. The next thing you want to do, right? Who looks like they know what they're doing? And this is something that I've been doing a lot of with a bunch of former military volunteers, which is finding people wearing military gear, finding people who look like they might be the real deal. And honestly, I have no idea how to identify those people. So I dragoon in a bunch of former military people and experts, gear experts. Malcolm Nance is one of the people who I've somehow persuaded to do this, I show hundreds of photographs to, and they come back saying like, well, that's actually a cheap Chinese copy of a Special Forces plate carrier. This guy's a super LARPer. The fourth, by the way, is people doing violent things. So we have these different axes, and then you got to prioritize. And what's interesting is the hardest targets, some of them are still out there. There's one particular person we call individual number 4 who was covered from head to toe and bizarrely wore a bunch of white and Sperry boots. Presumably it's like, sort of the 2021 through the looking glass version of the Brooks Brothers riot. We still can't identify this person because the face was always covered. So it's like my white whale. This is sort of what we've been doing.
Fascinating. That is fascinating.
That's unbelievable. And God bless you guys for doing it, because I know law enforcement is happy for your assistance in this, and it gives other people an ability to use their skill sets to identify these folks, because it was such a large operation. The man hours it's unbelievable, the amount of man hours that go into trying to identify all of these people. And it's do we know why this guy and his son haven't been arrested yet?
I mean, there are lots of people who haven't been arrested yet. And for the record, none of them have been, accused by anything legal yet of committing any crimes. These are all allegations. I think realistically, we're still watching arrests happen. We still see indictments drop. Those things are happening on the daily. And what is remarkable is the tempo of that. So even though we're still feeling like, there's a lot to be done, it's remarkable how many people have been arrested. And, if you listen to what the, former prosecutors will say publicly, they'll say like, they kind of did the same thing. They focused on who was visible first, who really stuck out, like the zip tie guy. So the thing that got me interested in this was I've been watching Stop the Steal for who brought his mother. And there's a moment, and I have to say this. That was an investigation that me and a crew of thousands did. That was kind of what got me into this. And there's this moment before we ID'd him publicly, but I was watching this Facebook video that he'd recorded, because of course he was streaming, right? And he's walking towards the Capitol. This is Eric Munchell, aka Zip Tie Guy, and he's walking with his mom, and they're like talking about like, gosh, we have the bags. And then he bumps into some other, Maga Hadin walking next to him. And he's like, oh, sorry, bumped you. And the guy's like, that's all right. He's like, oh, sorry, bumper buddies. And it's just like, I just remember having this moment where I was just like, it's like the sublime and the ridiculous and the terrible all wrapped into one. And here we are 100 days later, and I am still having those experiences. I crack open Shannon's Facebook today, and he's posting about Bill Gates. And it's like, my God, these people, on the one hand, they're a threat to democracy. And on the other hand, it's like, man, like they're bananas. And they're goofs. And some of them are losers. That's the other thing, right? Like Don Shipley.
Favors.
Yeah. Don Shipley, very well-known former SEAL, real former SEAL, did a lot of stuff, well-known for exposing stolen valor. Don told me, and he's given me permission to quote him publicly, that he wasn't surprised because Shannon never really amounted to jack shit as a SEAL. And I think like that goes to something deep here, which is there are a lot of people who came with a lot of complexes and a lot of insecurity. And there's some moments where I'm sitting there listening to this stuff, like listening to the podcasts of these people, and I'm just like, what hurt them so badly? Where is that wound? What is so broken? I think there are two parts. There's the individual story. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Your points is these are some people in, even the ones who've gone through something as rigorous as Bud's training in the SEALs. You know, they are living in this world of grievance and manufactured outrage and this bubble where they're told constantly, Antifa will get you, the liberals will get you, you'll be canceled, BLM is going to get you, caravans are going to get you. They live in this bubble of just absolute helpless paranoia. And so I think when they get into a playground like the Capitol that day, and maybe you've seen this in some of your research, I don't know, they get into a playground like that, and for the brief period of time that they're completely off the hook and off the chain, they're not controlled by any external social strictures. They act. I mean, that's their id. They're the id of the American political system now. It's an ugly kind of thing, but they only have that because they've lived in this Fox News bubble, this Facebook bubble of Facebook groups that tell them, "Why, yes, Bill Gates is injecting you with nanobots. Fight back."
Go a little deeper. I think let's go a little deeper. I think there's this other thing going on, which is they were all pointed at the Capitol because they thought they were receiving transmissions from Trump telling them to do that. Right? Yes. It was everything but the thing. Everything but the thing. Yes. And then they show up and it's like, well, what do? Some people had a purpose, but a lot of people just did what they were sort of like kind of wanted to do all along, right? And that's what's so interesting, which is despite the constant, suffocating back to the blue narrative, there were people jabbing at cops with thin blue line flags. There were people who clearly were overjoyed with the violence, were like running high on the adrenaline in that moment, and others there who really wanted violence, who wanted to fight, who were looking for it. And that to me speaks to something deep, which is like, have you ever been in a situation where something has started to leak and you just realize, oh man, there's no way I can patch this leak up, whether it's a milk can or whatever, and you're just like, oh man, this is trouble. Trump kind of like, he lanced this giant boil of terrible stuff and provided a rhetorical top cover for it. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, I had one, I'm not really going to specify teacher or teacher's aide. There was a person who clearly didn't mind seeing bullying. And it turns out that when a person in charge of a classroom of young people doesn't mind bullying, the bullies are like, let's do this, right? And a lot of the other people who would otherwise sort of be like, neutral or unsure are ready to go, want to watch it, want to see it. And Trump totally did that. Trump was the teacher. The preschool teacher was like, you know what? Let's bully. And I'm going to laugh about it. And I'm going to encourage the bullies. And I'm going to hold them up as examples. And I'm going to show them how to bully. I'm going to do it myself. And that's we got exactly what he said he was going to do.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. There's a sense of liberation from control and being told, yeah, the bullying is fun. It's funny. You should do it. You should get out there, own the libs, be transgressive. A little ass kicking proves that your, testosterone is still flowing at the Trumpian levels. I think
because
that's
they
exactly
can't prove it in other ways.
On point.
And room for their racism, room for their fears, room for the easy xenophobia. And it is some beautiful poetry that a person of color saved our democracy. And it's some beautiful poetry that a bunch of the people hunting folks who are in the Capitol are people of color who are anonymous. And it's just, who's got democracy's back? It's not those people who are jabbing at cops.
No.
That's right. I often say that they pervert patriotism. There was nothing patriotic about what those people did that day. It was the polar opposite. It was treasonous. And yet these extremists have hijacked what it means to be a patriot, which is infuriating to a lot of us, which is why we call it out. We have a tweet. Let's put it up there. All right. Is there a website that we can go to help identify the people at the riot? John, where can people go if they want to help out?
Well, there are three basic things to keep in mind. The first is never identify people publicly unless you're working with a reporter or they've been identified by the government. That's extremely important. The only reason this process works is because people are being careful. Second thing, there are some amazing websites that you can go to find large amounts of evidence. One is called jan6evidence.com, which has hundreds of parlor videos organized across time, spread out on a map of the Capitol. But ultimately, there's a large and organic community of people calling themselves sedition hunters on Twitter who have organized into groups and who are doing this work. At this point, what I would encourage you to do, if you're curious or motivated by anything you've heard today, is to take a look at that hashtag, take a look at the people who are being careful, get a sense of the groups, look at the things that they're posting, and if you see things that they haven't noticed, reach out to them first, rather than just doing it on your own. That way your contribution will be noticed, and it will also be done carefully. But great question.
It's a great way of human crowdsourcing, and it's been rather successful thus far. It's led to a lot of arrests, and I know law enforcement is thankful for it. Before I let you go, I have two last questions for you, John. One is a little off topic, but it's in your wheelhouse, and it's also in the news this week because the president decided to take action against the Russians and sanction them for the SolarWinds cyber attack. This is in your area here. How significant was that hacking operation? Should we be concerned that we're going to see something worse than that? And was what the president did enough to dissuade Russia from doing this again?
For 4 years, people working on hacking had this problem, which is bad things were happening, and the Trump administration, when it came to Russia, none of us felt like the administration had our back, not meaningfully. And that's a bad thing to feel as a researcher, and that's a bad thing to see for democracy. I think it's really important that the current administration continue to be muscular in how it responds to these things. And what I'm most concerned about is that it get of two minds and divided again and confused. I think we saw in the trailing end of the Obama administration that there was uncertainty about how to respond to Russian action. And it is my hope that we've learned something from that time and are moving towards a place where responses are strong and where they're proportionate. To the third thing, how big of an issue was the SolarWinds hack? I mean, I think the one message that I really want people to take away about this kind of hacking in general is that there's basically two kinds of hacking. There's hacking in order to listen and to spy, and then there's hacking in order to break and damage things. But the prerequisite for either of those things is gaining access. And the SolarWinds was all about gaining access. And the full extent of what was done.
Uh-oh. See, we start talking about hacking, and look what happens.
Right.
I tell you.
Russians pop on in.
What? There you go. Wait, he's back. He's back.
You know what? Bill Gates again with the microchip. He could have. Where did you lose me?
We lost you at the
if
last
I'm
part about what people should
at least want better Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no kidding. The last part about what people should know about the SolarWinds hacking, why it's so important.
Okay. So there are two main things that you really want to do when you hack. Either you're there to kind of like listen in, and you're ultimately trying to spy, or you have plans to like damage something, to break things, to take a system offline, or to really cause trouble, or do some other stuff like that. SolarWinds was the kind of thing that's a prerequisite for either of those on a global scale. It was access. What could have been done with that access in terms of what could have been monitored, or the damage, I think is still just like at the level of almost unimaginably substantial. And for every SolarWinds hack, and I know it's big and I know it's scary, there are probably others like it lurking around there. Honestly, one of the things we've discovered about Russia is that they keep going. And Russia, in its own way, is large. There are a lot of different military services that are doing hacking. They're somewhat loose jointed, and they're in competition with each other. And I think, and what I hope to see, is that the Biden administration continues to use the unprecedented visibility that the NSA and others and Five Eyes partners have on Russian operations to really experiment with ways to get Russia to knock it off.
It's extraordinary, and it's something that I think it gets lost in the day-to-day of the world and other problems. But this is something that's significant, and I'm thrilled that we have an administration that actually does take this seriously and doesn't cast it aside like they did for 4 years. God knows how much access and how much was compromised during the Trump administration. I think we'll continue to find out more and more about it. But I would have been remiss if I did not ask you, given the news this week and the actions taken, and I'm sure it's an area of interest to you outside of just January 6th. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. This has been amazing. I hope people continue to follow your work. And you've got to tell us, what's with the fish? What's with the fish?
I have no idea. I'm just making do with what's around.
I mean, it's like a super huge carp or something coming. I'm waiting for it to like open its mouth and take you out. Like, what is happening?
The truth is, there's no real explanation.
That's all right. It's kind of like the Matrix. There is no spoon. John Scott-Railton, you're amazing. Keep up the great work, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, guys. Big pleasure.
The explanation is there is no explanation. I love it. He's fantastic. All right. Well, Rick, as we come to a close tonight, and I just want to make sure that I say thank you to our amazing production team. It's been a pleasure working with them. Zelda Vision, you guys, they've been responsible for a lot of the funny videos and some of the things that you see that are outside Lincoln Project content, and we're grateful for all their hard work, and it's been a pleasure working with them. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we are going on a mid-season hiatus for a couple of weeks, but don't worry, you'll still see and hear from us during that time frame. So make sure you follow us at LPTV to hear updates and what we're doing and how you can follow us and some of the new and interesting things we'll be doing. And engaging with you as an audience. And make sure you sign up to our Honestly Abe newsletter. The Honestly Abe newsletter. You can also get information on what we're doing and some insider tips on what's happening and some content there as well. So if you have not signed up for Honestly Abe, make sure you do it. And tonight we are going to leave you with one final Zelda production for us. It's a little taste of how MAGA world is not only deeply dangerous, which we've established clearly, but they're really pretty stupid. And they put it together in a reel of their music videos. So we're going to leave that with you, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Good night from The Breakdown.
Good night, folks. Thanks to the Zelda guys.
3, 2, 1.
Got my driver's license last week, just like we always talked about. Cause you were so excited for me to finally drive up to your house. And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay. Now that I'm gone, guess you didn't mean what you wrote in that song about me. Cause you said forever, now I drive alone as you're straight.
All right.
world's eighth wonder, Trump Taj Mahal, a shining treasure. It's Donald Trump's astounding Taj Mahal. Come share the magic, experience the wonder of it all. Beyond your wildest dreams, Trump Taj Mahal.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.